Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're learning Masechtas Bava Batra daf Kuf Samach Gimel. We are going to begin on the very bottom of Kuf Samach Beis Amud Beis. We're learning about the laws of documents. On this, the Gemara asks, Iboilhu Shnei Shitin She'amru. When we said that if you have two lines that are blank, in which that will potentially parcel the document, because we're concerned that people will write forgeries and write whatever they want in those blank spaces. As we continue, Kuf Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, Hein va'aviron or Dilma hein va'aviron. Is that including the extra space necessary between the lines? In other words, you write a line, but the question is, does that include, when we say the two lines, there's also airspace? So, for example, when it comes to a lamed, you have to extend the lamed upward, or the chaf sofit, where you have to extend the chaf sofit downward. So you need extra space between the lines, otherwise the two lines are going to end up hitting each other with certain words. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak Mastabra Dehein Va'aviron. It's inclusive. It's not including the airspace, and even two will passel without airspace. So Shita Achas V'Avira, if that's the case, one line without even any airspace, what is that even able to do? You can't even write anything because there's literally nothing, no ability to write anything there. So therefore, we learn out based on the one-liner, king of the one-liners, that it's Hein Va'aviron Shema Mina. And this is question 4b. Shnei Shitin Shomer Hein Va'aviron or Hein V'Aviron. So it's Aviron. That's all the question is. And then TB 28, Iboil, who asked the same question, Ma Pashtu. So Hein Va'aviron may Hein Lavad Lo Shayach Gezerah O Pasel B'mnei Shehu Barim Oysa Shini Al Davar Muat. Okay, this is totally wrong. Pashut is just because of Shita Achas. Otherwise, what's the purpose of a Shita Achas? Okay, all right. Maybe I got half credit for that. All right, let's keep going. So Shema Mina. So the Gemara continues. Rabbi Shabtai Omar Mishmei de Chizkiah. He said in the name of Chizkiah, Shnei Shitin She'amru. That which we said, two lines that are blank, including the airspace that are possible. Biksav Yedei Edim, is it referring to the space in which Edim write? Because Edim, when they sign a document, they make their font quite big. Voksav Yedei Sofer. If that's what it's referring to, it's not talking about the Ksav of the Sofer, who is able to write much smaller. So my time, the Chol de Mazayev, because then when he forges Lavagabi Safra Ozo Mazayev, they're not going to go to a scribe. So only a scribe knows how to really write in this particular way. Someone who is a forger is probably not a professional cipher who's a Yoreh Shemayim, we'd imagine. And therefore, when we talk about this issue, we're talking about space in which a typical forger would be able to do it, which would be the ksav of a Yedei Edim. The comma, and how much is this? So Rav Yitzchak Bar Yitzchak going lechacha. Lechacha, as I mentioned, the lamid extends upward, and the chaf sofi extends downward. Zel gabi zeh. And therefore, if you write lechacha and zel gabi zeh, the problem is that the lamid on one line could end up, the top of it, be hitting the chaf sofi on the bottom. If the chaf sofit is, if lechacha is written again on the top, and the chaf sofit is on the top line, and the lam is on the bottom line, so the chaf sofit, which goes down, the lam goes up, they could be hitting each other. So you need to have ample space. So that's what that answer is. It says the Rashbam, V'dayin sarach aver ben shita l'shita mulvad, oivi haksiva kadei she'im hayu l'cha shnei l'cha b'shnei hashitin. If it says l'cha on two lines, Zebel Yoinim, Zebel Tachtoin, one above the other. Sarshul Yiga Meshach Goiva Halamid Shel Lecha. The Lamid, the top of the Lamid, cannot hit Hatachtoin El Hagia B'cha Shel Lecha. It can't hit the Chaf Sofi, which is above it. So therefore you have to have a decent amount of space so that not just the regular letters, but the letters that go upward, that they need to be able to have that space so as not to interfere with any letters that go down as well. Which those two types of letters can be written right next to each other, one on top of the other. Which means you have to have a lot of space, basically. Alma, what do we say? Again, so there ends up being 2 lines and 4 air spaces. Because, again, you need to have an airspace above it and an airspace below. Actually, not only that, you have to have, on each line, you have to have an airspace and an airspace. Because you need an airspace for the Chaf Sofi, and then you need another airspace above, which is on the next part for the Lamed. That's a pretty lenient opinion. Actually, you don't have to have, even if you write Lechacha, you can kind of space it out a little bit, even though the Lecha is on line, top line, Lecha is on the bottom line. You don't have to write it pumped that the Lamed is right below the Chaf Sofi. You could move it just a slight amount, so this way it'll be like this, but they still won't be hitting each other. Baruch ben Levi b'shita achas. He actually doesn't even contend with anything above, but just, for example, Baruch ben Levi, even though it has a Chaf Sofi on the bottom, it has a Lamed above, but it's the same line. So therefore you only have to contend with one below and one above, not 2 and 2, or total of 4, total of 3. So therefore, Baruch ben Levi b'shita achas kasaver shita achas shnei avirin. You just have to have shnei avirin, one for the Lamed above, and one for the Chaf Sofi on the bottom, on the same line. Amarav lo shanu el bein edim l'ksav. The only time we say this, says Rashbam, shnei shitin the pasul, that having 2 lines is pasul. Says Rashbam, shtar shikaseh bo henpik. If you have a star in which there is a certification on it, dahainu ashrasa, I feel here chayos mishtei shitin kosher. So the only time it's an issue, lo shanu el bein edim l'ksav, avol bein edim l'ashrata. If let's say it's between the signatures and the validation, I feel tuvanami kosher. The fact that there's a validation written on the document, then itself makes it kosher. Okay. Maishna bein edim l'ksav. So what's the problem between the body of the document and the signature, that we don't want to have too much airspace, because Dilma Mazai v'Kasa. Mada boy v'chasimi sahadi. He'll basically forge whatever he wants in between, and they'll have signatures underneath. So bein edim l'ashrasa nami Mazai v'Kasa mada boy v'chasimi sahadi. What's the difference if it's a verified document? If there's empty space, he could still cheat. Your answers, dimetayitle, they color it in with ink. So therefore, basically, says the Rashbam, Koloimer mechalkalo b'dioi. They basically mess it up with ink. Ven yachalichto by shom ziyuf. And therefore, since they basically fill it in with all this extra space, like we do with a check. When we sign a check, we write $40.00, and you put a line. So they fill in this space. If you have this hempik, the Chachamim made it that whenever they do a hempik, they fill it all in, all those gaps. So if you ever find a hempik in which you don't see those gaps, you know that it's possible. Understand, it sounds like a great idea. So if you have all this extra space, to avoid the whole potential issue of forgery, so just fill it in with ink. So Amri Sahadi Atiyutu de Kasimi. The problem is, when you look at the signatures, maybe the signatures are not on testifying on the actual document, but they're just testifying that that actually is what was done. It was colored in, and not that some of it was like crossed out, but that it was actually deliberately, it was blank and someone put coloring in there. But not necessarily does it prove that these witnesses are saying anything about the validity of the document itself. Well, Bein Edom La Shartanami. Well, you can say the same thing by based in Amr Beidina Atiyutahu Dechasimi. Maybe all they're doing is testifying on that, but not on the validity of the document. No, Beidina Atiyuta Uchasimi. A based in will not ever testify on just the ink. That's not what they do. When they have a handpick, they're verifying the validity of the document itself. And therefore, because of that, there's no reason to be chayshish. But that's only in a situation when we're dealing with a based in. When it comes to Eidim, they potentially are testifying on that. And therefore, that's the reason why we don't fill it in like that, because otherwise, those signatures are never going to be accepted. So, v'leichish dilma guy is le'elah. Why aren't we afraid that maybe he's going to cut off the top of the star, u'machik le'tiyuta, and he'll erase the ink, because of madaboy, he'll write whatever he wants. Umachdim sahadi, witnesses will sign. V'amarav shtar habahu, the edav al machak kosher. Rav says that a star that comes with him and witnesses on the machak, on the erased star, it's considered to be a kosher star. So the question is, as the Rashbam basically points down over here, is a person could erase this ink and forge the signatures. So again, when we said regarding the Eidim, we said maybe the Eidim are only testifying that the star was colored in, not by the Baal, but not on the Iker of the star. Okay, but even so, the problem is, this guy could still cause problems with forgery. So how does this alleviate the problem? As we continue to Kuf Samach Gimel and Beis, you can see the extent the courts did to avoid such people. So Anichlo Rav Kahana the Masni Law Mishmei Shmuel. It's good according to him. Shopper says Rashbam. Ekel Meimer the Rav Havi Posel V'lo Tik Shel Rav, who says that this type of situation, the star is kosher. If you hold the star is possible, then there's no concern. El Rav Tav Yomi the Masnil Mishmei the Rav Michael Maimor says the Rashbam. V'hach kasha b'chol shtaros. There's all documents yesh ba handpick. Yochel haksha. So you can ask this question. Tefil heicha delekish ne shitin cholok ben edim l'shtar a sharta. Even if there isn't these two lines, Shar Yochel Zayiv Kol Shtar Elyon, you can forge the whole top of the document. Im Ha'edim, V'lichtel V'lachtem Al Hamachak Mashirtz, and you can write and sign on the erasures whatever you want. So Ksavar Kikol Haigavna in Makiyamanoisum in Hasharta Shabai El Min Ha'edim Shabo. If you have all of this like erasures and stuff, then at that point we're not going to accept it just based on the verification. Rather, we're going to actually require witnesses to come. It says Rashbam, Haksuvim al Machak, the ones who actually are the ones who wrote on the Machak and witnessed that writing, that they're the ones that will verify it. So someone who does forgery and there's this handpick, that's not going to do anything, because if they see there's a bunch of erasures on a document, it's not going to be accepted. You need witnesses. So Rabbi Yochanan the only time that we have these two lines, says Rashbam rather, Lo shanu hirchekas edim keshir shnei shitim, that is possible, is only again if it's between the witnesses' signatures and the ksav. Avobein edim asharta, when it comes to this, afil shita achas possible. he actually holds that even one line is puzzle. Even one line is going to puzzle. So, in other words, therefore, inking in the space doesn't help, because according to the way that Tosfos explains this, he holds judges would sign merely to testify regarding the inked in area. So their certification will not validate the document itself. So what's the difference? Dilma Zaygl Eloi, maybe he's going to cut off the top of the text. The Kosahu of Edo Beshita Achas. He's going to write one line. Savar Shtar Habahu Edo Beshita Achas Kosher. Okay. Same issue. Maybe we'll cut off the top of the text. The Kosamai de Boy Vachasimi Sahadi. To Savar Shtar Habahu Beshita Achas. The Edo Beshita Acheres Puzzle. That if all you do has a star with one line of text, and then there's signatures on the second line, it's puzzle. And the idea is that you wouldn't do this if there was all this extra space. It says the Rashbam, V'yafagav de Matayit, even if there is this ink. So Dilma Kosav Hu Ve'edu B'shita Achas, maybe you wrote one line, Yama Anola Rabos Be'edim Davdi, and they ends up getting more witnesses. Savar Koki Agavna Ein Makayemanosim and Edim Shalomata Elmina Edim Shalomala. We're not going to testify, accept the testimony of the witnesses on the below, but rather you must verify the earlier signatures. Okay, and that's going to be the end of this daf. Well, let's look at a couple of questions. And again, we have so many different potential concerns of forgery. So let's look at question 5. Hirchak Edav Mahakiyum, so that signatures distance from the verification. Bekama shitin nifsal hashtar imatayid harevach. How many lines will be puzzle in the star if there were all the empty space was filled in with ink, and how much if it was not filled in with ink? So according to one Mandaimer, shita achas is kosher. Shnei shitin puzzle. That we said that in between one line is kosher, 2 is puzzle. El imkin matayid. If you filled it in with ink, then even more than 2 is kosher. One Mandamer says it doesn't make any difference. Even if all there is one line, even if it's all filled in, it's always puzzle. We're always going to be strict. Okay, TB 28 we saw. TA 27. Madul Rav Yochanan. Why, according to Rav Yochanan, Hirchek Hashrata bin Min Edim, if you distance the certification from the signatures of the witnesses, Afil Shita Achas Posel, then he says that even one line is Posel. Uve'ez Ashtar Nilman Mekan Shekosher. So the issue is Dilma Zaygli Loy, because we're afraid that Hitaka will erase the top or cut off the top. Yukosov Huv Edav B'shita Achas. He's going to write everything on one line. V'svir Shtar Haba Huv Edav B'shita Achas Kosher. Hitaka holds that Shtar Haba Huv Edav B'shita Achas is kosher, and therefore because of that, he's of the opinion that even one line is going to be a problem, and there because he could be writing everything, and therefore that's the reason why even B'shita Achas will passel the document. Adkan.